Mary and I arrived at the airport on April 22nd, and we waited for Pavel. He showed up, and we were pleased that he brought a young man from his church. His name is David Carabut. David is 17, and he was actually born in Donetsk, where all the fighting is, and he's been over here since he was 3 years old. But this was David's first mission trip, and he was really a joy to be with. Remember the old line, "Oh, youth is wasted on the young." He sure put a lot of fire in us just trying to follow David around. But what a nice young man. Our flight was from Kansas City to Washington, D.C., and then from Washington, D.C. to Munich, and then from Munich on into Kishinev. We started off with 3 catastrophes. Mary lost her cell phone. Then she left her coat back at the table. Then second of all, she gets on the plane and she loses a crown on her tooth. So I told Mary, bad things come in 3, so we're in good shape. The rest of the mission trip's going to be a cinch. Here's a picture of us at the table, sitting around having coffee before our flight. And once again, Tatiana did an incredible job arranging all of our flights, and everything was on time. And there's a picture of David and his mother, and Tatiana and Pavel and me. We arrived at the airport, and as always, we always have an issue with our witnessing tools. We took over 500 pairs of eyeglasses and 2 suitcases full of Beanie Babies, and as soon as we got through customs, they pulled us to the side and thought we were going to sell this stuff on the black market, and it was kind of a funny story. Pavel called me back and said, explain to the soldier there what we were going to do, and he really didn't care. But he's funny. He asked Pavel to bless him, give him the American blessing. Somebody the night before at the spaghetti dinner had dropped $50 in Mary's purse, and so that was the money that Pavel used to bless the guard so we could get our suitcases and our witnessing tools on through. We always try to be there on Saturday morning for their Sabbath worship. There's 2 Messianic Jewish churches there that are pastored by, the first one here is Pastor Vladimir Mosheviv, and Pastor Vladimir has the wonderful testimony. His brother Vanya was martyred during the Soviet takeover back in the early 1960s. Was it 70? 1972 was when he was martyred. But Vladimir wrote a book called Vanya, and the book, Pastor Nathan's wife, Janie, read the book when she was a young girl, and as a result of that book, she gave her life to Christ. And it was a bit of pure joy for Janie to, last September, to have the opportunity to actually meet Pastor Vladimir face to face. We gave Vladimir a letter of thanks from Pastor Janie, and Janie had written a card and gave it to Mary to give to him. But what a blessing this gentleman is. He's got some kind of rare blood disease where his hands turned blue, but what a tremendous warrior for Christ. And it's a small congregation. At one time, the congregation was made up of Holocaust survivors that were new creatures in Christ, but since our trip in 2012, most of them have gone on to be with the Lord, and I don't think there's any Holocaust survivors that are still living.
No. This is Pavel interpreting for me as I was addressing the Messianic Jewish Church. This was the Saturday of Palm Sunday, before Palm Sunday. It was just a pleasure to meet with each one of them, and their greeting was Shabbat Shalom.
This is a good picture. Right outside of Pastor Yvonne's church is the Moldova Parliament, where all of the chaos is going on there, and that's a good picture of the 4 of us. It seems back in December that the president of Moldova and some of his henchmen stole $1 billion for the treasury, and the country now is bankrupt. There's 2 forces outside that have been protesting, kind of like our Wall Street protest a few years ago, but there's the pro-Moldavian protesters and the pro-Russian protesters. The pro-Moldavian want to stay separate, and they don't want any part of the European Union, and the pro-Russians want to bring back in hardcore communism. So even though they don't like each other, they have one thing in common, and that's they're very, very angry about the government stealing all their money from them. After the Sabbath service, we went down to the kind of the flea market area and wanted to get some souvenirs to take home. And we walked by providentially, we walked by the poster of Pastor Sergei Kernev and his family. They're going to be performing down at the square in a couple of days, but there's a beautiful picture of those amazing family. More about that in a minute and their testimony. That Saturday night, we drove up to Dubasari Vik to our dear friend Pastor Valentin and his wife Vera. What an amazing testimony they have. At one time, Valentin was the town drunk and then received Christ as a Savior, and Daniel Apasta, our dear friend, is the one that taught him how to grow things, and he now, when we first met him, he had one greenhouse. Now he has 17, and he's most productive, and what a hard worker. Here we're just looking at some of his plants, and one of the pictures shows some hybrid corn that he's developed and been producing. He has over 54 tons of vegetables every year he produces out of those 17 greenhouses, and that nobody goes hungry that goes to his church or any of the other churches around him. He'll furnish his young plants to anybody that wants to plant them free of charge.
This is Valentin showing David their outhouse that they use. They have an inside bathroom, but they use the outhouse all the time instead. So he had to see that for the first time. We're still at Valentin's house here, and they feed us a wonderful meal every time we're there. They have fresh eggs from their chickens out in their yard, and Woody every year eats one more egg, and I think he was up to 12 this time. I think he ate 11 and couldn't.
No, they
okay.
put 13 on my plate, but I only ate 12 and gave the other one to Daniel.
There we go. But they're wonderful, and he was foolish enough to do that.
Mary and I always take several things with us. One thing we always take is 2 rolls of duct tape, and we always take, each of us takes 2 jars of peanut butter, and we always take 2 jars of coffee and tea for the people. Peanut butter is a very sought-after item, and this is a picture of Valentin's new daughter-in-law, Anna, and she had never tasted peanut butter. So we let her open the jar and get a picture. I had to get a picture of her, and the first thing she said, it was sticky. But anyway, that's the first bite of peanut butter. This is down in the cave that's underneath his house. At one time, this is where he stored all his wine. And when he became a Christian, he invited a bunch of his old drinking buddies over, said they're going to have a celebration, but he had to help them get the wine barrels out of the basement, out of the cellar. So a bunch of his old drinking buddies carried these big wine barrels up into the streets, and unbeknownst to him, Valentin grabbed a sledgehammer and broke all of the wine cases over, and he said those Ruskies out there lapping the wine up like puppy dogs. But this is where he used to store it. Now this is where he keeps all of his vegetables in the wintertime. This was Palm Sunday, and we were worshiping at Pastor Yvonne's church, and I thought it was interesting. As we were sitting there and I was waiting for my turn to present the message, we knew outside there was over 200,000 protesters, angry in the streets, and there was over 3,000 policemen that were there to subdue it, to make sure that the demonstrations were peaceful. And my message that day was from Luke chapter 19, when Jesus entered into Jerusalem for the last time, and it just reminded the correlation between the angry Pharisees trying to keep the disciples quiet, and they were yelling at, please keep the noise down, you're being too noisy and making too much noise. And remember, Jesus made that prolific comment that if they don't proclaim me, even the rocks will cry out. And I made the analogy as just think outside these walls, the people are angry, they're bitter, they're fighting, they're demanding rights, and yet inside the peace of Christ passes all human understanding. We're not worried about anything but presenting the gospel and worshiping the Lord. If you remember in 2014 when we were in Odessa, the pro-Russian antagonists stormed the Parliament building and 46 people were killed. The police of Moldova were not about to let that happen. So they were locked arm in arm and completely surrounded the Parliament building. But what a beautiful way to present the message of Christ. On one hand, the world is in turmoil. Inside the church walls, the world's at peace. All for His glory.
Just 2 more pictures of the situation there. It just shows the protesters and all the police. It was quite amazing to see the whole scene take place.
We had to walk over there afterwards, but Pavel said, leave everything in the car, so in case we have to escape, you won't have to drop anything.
Visit Grigori Saraduke that we visit each time we go. He's has paralyzed legs. He's in a rest home. Probably one of the most joyful men that are there that we visit. He is so big and muscular. I was so amazed at that. And he told us that he goes to church. The church is about a mile away, and it's uphill. And he takes that wheelchair and takes himself up that hill every Sunday. So he stays in shape that way.
We asked him, what about in the wintertime when it's cold? He said, I've got a coat and a hat. This is a picture of Pavel standing next to his great father's grave. What a testimony. For 13 and a half years, Pavel's father endured torture and under the communist reign for preaching Christ. Pavel's father is known throughout the former Soviet Union as the conquering hero, and he is known and loved throughout. And we were there in 2012, like 2 days before he passed away. And Pavel got back one day from our mission trip and had to fly back the next for the funeral. But there were so many people at the funeral that they rented the soccer stadium. And they said that over 25,000 people attended his funeral. And this is a beautiful graveside. And on May the 3rd, Pavel's brother Benjamin was flying in from Moscow, and his other brother Ivan was flying in from Siberia, both pastors. And they were going to have a graveside celebration of his fourth homecoming. So Pavel just wanted to stop by the gravesite real quick and make sure everything was ready, but a lot of preparations for a celebration of homecoming.
This is a picture of myself in the dental chair getting my crown put back on. I had to wait Monday to do it. It was just a blessing that I was able to wait that long for it. There was no pain.
This was a first. We've never been to the dentist in Moldova.
That's right, and he was a fine dentist. It worked well, and he said that he was thankful we were there, knew why we were there, and he didn't charge for it, so we were grateful.
This is a picture of a very special family that we met on our last mission trip. It's Nina Peruva, her son Eugene, the oldest daughter is Karina, and the other precious one is named Michelle. They all have health issues, and both of the girls have epilepsy, and Michelle is very sickly. And when we first met them in 2014, they were basically living in a mud hut. It was the most deplorable thing that we'd ever seen. They had no running water. They had no refrigeration. They had no heat, no way to heat anything. The only food they got was non-perishable items that Pastor Yvonne brought them twice a week. At Christmas time in 2013, Eugene went to Pastor Yvonne's church with a friend, and he received Christ and brought his family back. And since then, they've all become Christians. And if it wasn't for Pastor Yvonne and his work there, we don't know where they'd be. But part of our 2014 mission was to get them out of that place and get them in a decent apartment. So part of your 5 loaves and 2 fish furnished rent in a decent place for them to live for over a year. And here we are looking at this very special family and how well they're doing, and the happiness and the joy because of what Pastor Yvonne's done for them and what the Lord's done.
This is Nina and myself in her kitchen. She's showing me the apartment, and also the other story that I was just so touched by, how that church there has encouraged that family, taken care of that family. Eugene, the young man, the first Sunday that we were at Yvonne's church, I didn't realize it, but he was sitting there working the controls for the sound system. They're teaching him that to be, as he grows. They're teaching him to maybe do that as a trade someday, as a job someday. It's just touching to see how they take care of them and teach them and encourage them. This is Michelle. She was in bed that day because she doesn't always get out of bed. She has her little stuffed toys there. The one on the right, your left is one that David gave her. And then on the other is a doll that Ainsley Rankin made. She had told Woody that she couldn't go on the mission trip, but she could certainly make something and send it. And she made 5 dolls like this to give to children over there. And it made me realize that that little girl understands missions.
One of the things that brought the epilepsy on is when Nina, the mother, was pregnant with both of the girls. Their father was a drunk, and he beat her very severely. And her eyes to this day, Nina's eyes are crossed because of the beating she took. But the kids suffer from epilepsy, and at least twice, 2 to 3 times a month, they have to take her to the hospital. She has these epilepsies lead to these terrible migraines, and she goes into convulsions. And she's very sick. She's not able to attend school of any type. And because of the kids have special needs, many times they won't let them on the public transportation system. So part of the 5 loaves and 2 fish and what Mary and I gave them last year was to get them a taxi cab on the way to church, and then one of Pastor Yvonne's people will always bring them home. But now they can go home to a clean apartment, and because of your giving, this family is truly happy. Nina told us this time, had we not come along, that one of the children, if not 2 of the children, probably wouldn't be alive. And Nina at one time considered suicide herself, but being a new creature in Christ, she has hope and joy now. We're back Tuesday night at Dubasari Vik at Pastor Valentine's church for the Bible study that night, and it was quite a topic. I decided to speak on the radical transformation of Zacchaeus and compare him with Valentine, and it was a fun service. It was a small gathering, but Valentine is just such a gifted man. Mary and I have talked. We would love to have a mission conference where we could get Valentine, Pastor Yvonne, and Daniel Aposta here, and just share the whole weekend of their ministry in the poorest of all the former Soviet bloc countries. But Valentine is Nathan and Janie got to meet him and Vera when they were there in September, and like us, they fell in love with him and his passion for Christ.
This is also at the Tuesday night Bible study, and we're handing out the Beanie Babies. There were many children there, and it was just a blessing to see their faces, and we enjoyed passing out the Beanie Babies to them. This is the Don Bosco Center. We visited. It's an orphanage there where the children actually live there, and they're well taken care of. We were so impressed by how much they're loved by the staff. The staff was so warm and loving, and we got to meet several of the children and hand out Beanie Babies to them. There are many centers across the world. What a joy it was to spend time over there. And one of the things that I realized when I was there, we're an ocean apart from this country. We speak a different language, but yet we speak the same language. We're all in one with the Spirit, and we're brothers and sisters in Christ. And what joy that is. We don't even have to speak the same language, and we still feel the joy and love each other. Thank you.
Pavel got to share a message of Easter, and it was very important to the children how he talked to the children about after the resurrection, the disciples were abandoned and they were all alone, and they felt like that there was no hope and that nobody would love them, and they didn't even know where they would go next. And then he told them about Christ coming and touching the lives of the disciples, and it was really a moving story for these young orphans to understand the hope and joy that can be found in Christ and Christ alone. Even though they're orphaned, they're not alone. And Pavel really stressed about Jesus being their best friend and constant companion, and promised that he would never leave them or forsake them. We were on our way to the rehab center in a little village called Beriska, and there's a young man that actually was a former drug addict himself. His name is Sergei Malin. And he came there in 2008 for treatment, and he gave his life to Christ. And now he is the head of that rehab center. It's amazing. Pastor Vaughn, our pastor that never sleeps, we decided we'd go get some groceries, so we got about 50 pounds of potatoes, and we got cooking oil, and we got flour and all kinds of starches that they need. But it was fun to go into this supermarket, kind of like a Walmart, and we loaded up on stuff, and now we're on our way to the rehab center. Right now there are 9 men at the rehab center from 18 to 28, and we were surprised to see 1 woman. And we took a tour. We saw the many additions that they've made to the rehab center since 2014. Every man that is there learns the hard work and the joy of working. They work together as a team. They raise all kinds of exotic chickens and turkeys and pheasant, guinea fowl, peacocks and ducks. They raise pigs and cows and even regular chicken. Everything that they eat is grown right there on site. As Mary said over and over, these are the most resourceful people she's ever seen. They use junk to build what we'd normally throw away. On the back of the property, Mary and I saw wooden pallets, scrap iron, old steel gates, wooden doors. Nothing goes to waste. Even the manure from the animals used to fertilize the plants. Sergei said nothing is wasted here. Even the manure gives new life if it's treated right.
This is David standing beside the brick-making machine that they have at the center. You will see in the following pictures the brick walls that they made with this machine. This is Lilia, the woman that was there at the rehab center. I got to visit with her for a little bit, and then each one of the men that were there gave their testimony. She also gave her testimony why she was there, and her husband was also there. It was just encouraging to see this center that they've made available to these people. They just teach them a trade. They work hard. They're all out there working hard.
Before we left Sergei, we gave him 2 bags of our eyeglasses that we took and a wonderful gift from the Irish Crystal Company for their dormitory. This is kind of hard work and it's a very special place to visit. Again, Mary and Janie and Nathan were here when they visited. What was so amazing to me is the footprint that Janie and Nathan left every place that they visited. The people were so excited about our pastors being there to support our work in Moldova. Before we left, we opened up the trunk and we gave them they filled their pantries with all of the stuff that we brought them.
This is at Daniel's home. This is where we stayed. Daniel was preparing for, Daniela is their oldest daughter. She turned 14. They were preparing for a birthday feast for her. They cooked all day long getting ready for this, and they had several of the youth group there from their church that went to school with Daniela. Also, there was all kinds of music there. All of them played the guitar or sang or something. It was quite wonderful. And also, they had each person take their turn and share their favorite story about Daniela or giving a testimony about their walk with the Lord and what it meant to them. And also, they were just, each one was encouraged to give her a birthday blessing. And the thing that I was so impressed with was that her friend was sitting right next to her, writing each one of these blessings down so that she could go back and read them later. Pavel's mother was there, and Vera, and what she shared, she challenged Daniela to stay in the Word and never stray from the straight and narrow. And she said that there may be a time when persecution would come upon the believers, and if persecution does come, you must remain strong and trust Jesus for every tiny detail of your life.
It was interesting. We were there for the first hour, just singing and fellowship and coffee, and then singing for another hour and singing for another hour. I remember Mary said we'd been there 4 hours and hadn't even had cake yet, but we haven't even started eating yet. But what a feast we had! There was 19 young people there, and it was kind of funny when I thought all the meat was gone. I let the young kids eat first and thought, well, I'll be satisfied with salad, and turned around and Veronica, Daniel's wife, brought out 2 huge platters of chicken. So we had veal that night, we had pork chops, we had chicken, and 4 or 5 kinds of salads. And what a fun time we had. I've never been to a birthday party that lasted about 6 hours. I went to bed at 1, I went to bed at 11. Mary stayed up and helped clean up till 1 o'clock in the morning.
We should have put those 2 on there.
One of the treasures Vera, Pavel's mother, gave Daniela a picture during communist times that meant a lot to her, and as Vera shared, a challenge for her to stay strong. I think one of the highlights of the evening, Pavel challenged Daniela to keep a spiritual journey, to write down her thoughts, to write down her dreams, express your hurts as well as your joys. He said, protect your heart by looking to Jesus for every one of your needs. Pavel said, set your priorities and your goals high and never be satisfied with being average. Take care of your body, for it's the temple of God. For where your heart is, there your hearts reside.
The thing that impressed me about this so much was that why don't we all do this with our children each time they have a birthday? It was such a blessing to see that, and it was so meaningful to Daniela.
And nobody was hurrying home. Nobody had their video cameras. Nobody had their Reebok tennis shoes, and nobody had their video games or cell phones. It was there just to enjoy the evening and have a fun birthday party like I've never experienced. It's now Thursday, day 6 of our mission trip, and we were on our way to a tiny village outside of Kishinev, about 40 minutes drive. It's a village called Gobini, and there's a pastor there. His name is Nikolai Drone, and he and his wife, Larissa, both of them suffered terribly under communist persecution. And I remember mission trip 2014, we talked to Pastor Nikolai about his time of imprisonment, and I remember asking him if he had the honor of knowing Vanya, the martyred saint that meant so much to Janie, and I remember him saying, did I know him? He led me to Christ, and I thought that was very interesting. This most unique family, for hundreds of years, this about 20 acres of land has been in their family, and so his idea was for all of his 11 children to live there, each have their own house. The children have a very unusual gift of making stringed instruments. And one of the sons, Michael, we met him in 2007 on our mission trip, and he makes violins. And what a gifted young man he is. When we first met Michael, like I said, in 2007, he was 16, and somebody had given him an old violin that was all beat up, and he decided he wanted to not only learn to play the violin, but he wanted to learn how to make it. So he spent many hours reading all the books he could on how to make a violin. There was a contest, and he entered his violin, and several of the judges were angry with him for claiming that he had built this, because they know that nobody that age could have built a violin. But anyway, he ended up winning the contest, and he's become quite famous. In fact, so famous now that the Vienna Austria Society has commissioned him to come to Austria, and he's holding a model, a plaster model they sent him of a Stradivarius violin, and they have one that needs to be repaired, and they searched the whole world over and felt like he was qualified to come and try to repair the Stradivarius violin. And by the way, for $3,500,000, you can own a Stradivarius. There's only 450 of them left. But all of the young men make instruments. Some of them make the different kind of mandolins, and everything's made by hand. The tiny, minute details of every little detail. It takes them 6 months to make one musical instrument, and they have quite a shop there. All of their equipment has been handmade, and most of their tools are handmade, but what an incredible operation they have of building these musical instruments. This was quite unique. Danik and one of the other sons, his name was Pavel, and then Nikolai, on our mission trip 2014, we brought Danik a double French horn, and I remember Pavel hand carried that French horn all through the airport and got it there for them. But Danik has a gift of working with the youth there, and so in his little village, he has choir practice, and all of the kids play a brass instrument. So what a gifted family they are.
This is the trade school that we visit each time that we go. Luba and Nina are the directors of it, and they have quite a few students. They have different classes. They have a food class and also a secretarial and hairdressing, different trades that young people can learn from 18 on. They're usually the orphans that come from the villages that have nowhere to go once they're 18, and they learn a trade. there. It's a very good place to be for them. And Luba shared with us that since the government was broke, they are paid by the government, the employees there, 15 employees, and they have not been paid for 5 months, and they continue on. And this food school here, they even have to bring their own food to cook with, which they didn't have to in the past. Woody's the judge there. Woody and I were judging their cooking. It was a good experience.
We first met Luba and Nina in 2000, and every year we've the 5 Loaves and 2 Fishes helped them and support. We've bought them stoves and stainless steel cooktops. We've furnished equipment for a barber school, for the cosmetology school. The last 3 mission trips, we've given them $900 that pay for 3 scholarships for the students there. And this year, it was interesting because Luba and Nina said that she actually went and begged to the mayor that please don't turn off our electricity. If you turn off our electricity, these kids are going to be out in the open. And they were gracious enough to leave her electricity on for 1 more month, but we will be sure that they were well taken care of from our 5 Loaves and 2 Fish this time. But what an amazing, remarkable, these 2 women just go and go and go. And Pastor Yvonne is their local pastor. He comes in once a week to teach a Bible study. And Luba goes to his church, and Nina is part of the Orthodox church there. But we've grown to love them over the years, and if as broke as they were, they gave us presents. So we gave them 3 huge bags of eyeglasses, and we gave them a special gift from the Irish Crystal Company. And Luba and Nina just have a special place in our heart. This is a very special family that Mary and I met on our mission trip in 2007 when we traveled to Kogul and got the opportunity to preach in a prison there. But Sergei Kernev and his family, Renee jokingly, perfectly named them the Von Trapp's family singers. There's Slavik that was here just a few months ago, and he plays the pan flute. And then Pavel's the oldest. He plays the keyboard. And next is Sergei's 24-year-old daughter, Yurlina. She plays the violin. And then 19-year-old Vera and Galina also are accomplished violinists. They have a unique approach to their evangelism. Their ministry is in Iraq, Afghanistan, Saudi Arabia, and to the Muslim people. And what they do is they gather on the street corner and they start playing their musical instruments, and people gather around to hear, and then Pastor Sergei then presents the gospel, and while the kids are passing out tracts in whatever language, usually it's Arabic. And they just got back from a trip to Lebanon and to Afghanistan, and they said that this time they've been there so many times that not only were they not concerned about their safety, but the government furnished them guards that walked with them everywhere with the old Kalashnikovs to keep them safe. But we are very pleased. They're going to be here the 2nd week in July, and we're going to have a big time in asking our fellow Presbyterian church to come to hear them, because once you hear them, their sounds are incredible. What a gifted family, Sergei Kernev and the Von Trapp family singers.
This is a family here where they were at a local school. They were going to just play for this school. And also Sergei, this is the picture of Sergei, the father of all of this talented family. And he was going to give the gospel to these school children.
Here's a picture of 2 of the young girls, both extremely talented violinists, and we were presenting the gospel inside the public schools. Thought it was ironic. Here we have more freedoms in Moldova to go in public places and present the gospel than we do here. Mary and I have even been in the mayor's office and shared the gospel with him. We've been in the hospitals. We've even been in the military bases in Kogul with the opportunity of presenting the gospel and having some of the men pray to receive Christ while we were there. So what a joy it is to have the freedom, and how these people are embracing the freedoms of the ability to worship in peace. And what a joy to be there. Daniel Aposta is probably the one of the most entrepreneurial men that I've ever met. Everything he's touched, God blesses and turns to gold. He has a ministry of, like I said, of going around from place to place and teaching people how to plant and use God's principles in His Word. He has a special presentation from Ecclesiastes about casting your bread on the water, and he goes into different farming operations and public speaking events, and he shares with them the principles of how to grow and how to multiply. And the first day of the seminar, people are interested. The second day, he tells them this is all from the Bible. And what an unusual opportunity to preach the word. This is his family. Veronica is his wife, and Daniela, and Arina, and then the little guys is Ariel. And we got to stay with them, and again, Pastor Nathan and Janie got to stay with them at their house, and they are, one of our gifts would be to, like I said, get Valentine and Yvonne and Daniel here for a evangelism conference. We were on our way to Stresini. It's another village that's north of Moldova, and here we met with Veronica Martinek, and Veronica is head of Operation Reach All, which is a humanitarian outreach in Moldova that is funded by the German people. And part of our 5 loaves and 2 fish was in 2012. We gave them $1,000 to build 2 greenhouses, and now they're able to produce fresh vegetables for all of the orphans. She works with orphans. She has about 4 orphanages that they sponsor all of the food, and 4 of the elderly homes. If you remember Maria Project, who gave birth to our idea of taking glasses, when I first met Veronica in 2000, she was head of that old folks' home where Maria lived. Veronica is quite a mover and a shaker, and she has accomplished tremendous things for the Lord in her humanitarian outreach. I thought it was interesting that Daniel has worked very close with her and helping her teach her the trade and how she's taught other people how to grow vegetables. But they've got quite a prolific greenhouse going, and all of the plants there that are growing were given to her by Valentine as he started them from seed.
This is the greenhouse from Operation Reach All that we visited, and also there is the storehouse that you see there with all of the goods stored. The back row they always keep there in case of a country emergency, but there was many goods there that they pass out to all the needy ones.
From Stresnia, we traveled with Yvonne. He was able to acquire about a 50-acre piece of land that has been abandoned since 1986, so it is in terrible shape, but it's located next to a big lake. And of course, Yvonne and Daniel both are going to pioneer to they'll have to tear down these old, at one time it was a pioneer camp, which was a young communist kind of brainwashing session where they sent the kids in the summer to learn about how great communism is. Bernie would love that, wouldn't he? But anyway, we got there to the camp and we were walking around, and all of these old buildings are going to have to be torn down. But wow, Mary and I took one look and we said, boy, there's a lot of work to be done here. But with Daniel and Yvonne, nothing's impossible, and it'll be interesting to come back in 2018 and see what they've accomplished. By the way, while we're there, they had to, since it had been abandoned for 26 years and nobody had even touched this property, they had to get bulldozers even to clear down the trees so you could walk in there. But Mary had the dubious honor of stepping on a snake while we were walking down the roads. So anyway, Mary didn't hurt the snake, though.
This was at our second Easter at Yvonne's church that we celebrated. In the one picture, there's a Pastor Yvonne, and in the background is Daniela and Arina singing with their beautiful voices. And there's also Ainsley's baby doll in the other picture. Once again, we got to hand that out to this little child there. We went to 2 different services on Easter morning, and I think we were worshiping for 5.5 hours.
This was interesting. Afterwards, we were very hungry. The good news and bad news, none of the businesses were open. and that's bad news. But it really is good news because since the fall of communism, Easter has become a very significant day of celebration for the Moldavian people.
This is still at Pastor Vaughn's church on Easter morning, and there's Nina and Michelle, the family that we told you previously, the ill child, and she was well enough that morning to come to church. And Yvonne went to the back of the church and asked everyone to pray for them. They took a time to pray and to celebrate them being able to be there that morning.
This was Easter Sunday, and Pavel and David had gone on to Odessa, Ukraine, for worship. And Mary and I decided we were not going to take a chance of the car breaking down. Pavel and David stayed for another week, so we stayed back, and we traveled those 2 days with Daniel and Pastor Vaughn. And this is just a picture of Pavel and David and one of the friends that we stayed with last year in Odessa. That's by the Black Sea. And if you remember, in 2014, Crimea area was taken over by the pro-Russian antagonist, and there was a lot of bloodshed. Like I said, 46 people were killed when they stormed the administration building. Sunday night was the most fun time. It's a night we gathered together around, and we brought our needs before the Lord of all of the things that we thought that the 5 loaves and 2 fish need to go to help. We prayed over those needs, and we were able to give out over $9,243 to the ministries. And I just want to say that because of your generous giving since 2007, we've been able to give out $43,823 to the many projects that the Lord has put in our way. And I just remember the words of Jesus you've done the least of these, you've done so unto me. But Mary and I wanted to say thank you for giving unto the Lord through the 5 loaves and 2 fish. And I know a lot of you weren't able to participate, but you were there with us in spirit as we travel from place to place. And again, I take my hats off to any of you that were brave enough to read my daily journals. But it was a lot of fun to write and share the experiences.
And I also just want to thank you all for that, for the experience that we had there, and that your support and your prayers and your encouragement. It was a blessing to Woody and I, and your resources also blessed that country.